Hey, how's it going, guys? We got another land battle replay for you. This time it'll be Tequila Sunset on Lizardmen and Lazarus on the Chaos Dwarves. Now, for the Lizardmen, we're going to have a Slan Mage Priest of Death. For Chaos Dwarves, we're going to have Astrogoth Ironhand. For this video in particular, and for some later on, I'm going to be going for a more tactical approach, and other videos will be more cinematic like you've seen. So I'm going to try to break down some of the tactics that some players will be using in these matchups. For the Lizardmen, let's go over the units first. For Slan Mage Priest, we're going to have Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna, then his Bound Banishment, Shield of the Old Ones, and Blood Statute of Spite. For those who don't know, Fate of Buna and Spirit Leech are always staples brought for Death Casters simply because they're the most cost efficient for how much winds of magic you're using. 22 winds of magic. Fate of Buna does sound a lot, but it is extremely effective at dealing with lower model count units like Heavy Cav, or even just not even Heavy Cav, but just Cav in general. It can be dealt with monstrous units like, say, Bull Centaur Renderers, or say Salamanders if the Lizardman player had some. So just those are some good examples there, and they could help do quite a bit of damage and get those units off the field a lot faster than they normally would. Now for Spirit Leech, just a really good Lord sniping single entity spell that will do decent amount of damage, a good amount of chunk of damage slowly over time, and whittle down that target. So those are the reasons why you typically would see those. They've just been the meta since Total Warhammer 1 for Deathcasters. Now, for the rest of the army, we're going to have a full front line of skinks just because they're the most cost effective, really cheap. And we're also going to have two red crested skinks, one being the ROR variant. The only thing different between these two is something that's actually very useful is their ability, aside from stat differences, of course, their ability Refuse to Die. Now, this means that the Lizardman player can proc this at any time of their choosing to help keep them in the fight for 20 seconds longer and have none of the models of this unit die. So that means while they're fighting for 20 more seconds, they're not going to be losing any models. No skinks will be dying in it, but they'll still be doing all that damage that they normally would, and they'll be as unbreakable as usual. I mean, that ability has nothing to do with that, but that tagged on with unbreakable makes them really good. They'll be doing a lot of damage and staying in the fight longer than normal red crested skinks would be. And red crested skinks normally aren't great, but in high armored matchups, like against Chaos Dwarves, normal Dwarves, even against like Chaos Warriors, depending on how the Warriors player plays or their build goes, they're really good there as well. Just solid all around for these type of matchups. Another great armor piercing cheap unit would be the Feral Cold Ones. A lot cheaper than the red crested skinks, I believe. I mean, a little bit cheaper, I think, or maybe for 400 if I recall. A little iffy there, but Feral Cold Ones, two on each side, and the reason why: good, cheap AP, really good AP values at 34, and just decent speed, 70. They can get into the backline really quickly, and that's where this is going to come into the tactical breakdown for this situation, for this build here. The Lizardman player is going for a full swarm. Against Chaos Dwarves, they tend to have, or rather not tend, but Chaos Dwarves infantry are relatively expensive. The Chaos Dwarf units are expensive, so they typically would go with cheap infantry like slaves. Goblin laborers, orc laborers, laborers, can't say slaves there, they're laborers, they're forced laborers. So when you do, typically, skinks, I believe, are going to beat them either way. So it doesn't matter. You don't need to bring swords here. Swords wouldn't beat Chaos Dwarf warriors anyways, so they're just not needed. So skirmish skinks are great for this. You're going to limit them, you're going to swarm them with more than the Chaos Dwarf player can field, because you have a lot cheaper infantry, a lot cheaper ranged, just allows you to wear everything. So the player here is going to attempt to swarm them from all angles. All their infantry is going to be tied up. Anything protecting their backline will be tied up by skinks, by feral cold ones, by these feral bastillodons, etc. That is the tactic that this player is going for, and it's a really solid tactic against factions like the Chaos Dwarves who have expensive units. Because typically it's going to mean they can field less than you. And if your infantry is cost effective against their cheapest infantry, then this is what you're going to typically go for. And you can snipe off Chaos Dwarf Lords with Spirit Liege. Now for the rest of the army, Skink Skirmishers, fantastic. Chameleon Skinks are really needed here. Typically, you're not going to see Hobgoblin Archers or anything like that. So you don't need that extra missile resist that the Chameleon Skinks have. You should be using these to shoot at the laborers, shoot at Hobgoblin Cutthroats from behind, and even poke away at Bull Centaur Renderers, who have relatively lowish armor at 50. Another unit fielded here by the Lizardmen player, which is my favorite unit on the Lizardmen roster, the Colossal Hunters. They are going to be your primary source for dealing with large targets. They're going to be one of your best source for dealing with large targets. They are just so incredibly fantastic. As you can see from this stat line, 138 with their Frenzy, but 103 EP with a 15 bonus versus large and 64 melee attack. Relatively lowish melee defense at 32, and only 10 models and 45 armor. So they're really squishy. They are the definition of glass cannon. You have to be really, really careful with them. But if you are careful with them and you land them at appropriate times and pop that total rage ability of theirs, which they have, that the Regiment Arena has over the standard variant, they will ravage many, many large targets, many large entities like Bull Centaur Renderers and Heavy Cav, Blood Knights, etc. If they can get the right appropriate charge on them. You just have to find that right opportunity to pop that. You just gotta be really careful with them. Now, for the rest of the army, Feral Bastillodons, like I've mentioned before, good, cheap AP, have that bonus versus infantry, 140 armor. Typically, unless they're shot to death, they will do well for their cost and help you win fights that you normally wouldn't win against heavily armored units. Now let's get into the Chaos Dwarves. Astrogolf Iron Hand, what does he have? He has Black Hammer of Hashut, Cascading Fire Cloak, and Ash Storm. Cascading Fire Cloak just to keep his units in the fight longer, help Bull Centaur Renderers win their fights, and just a good cheap spell for 4 Winds of Magic. Ash Storm is going to pair really well here with his Fire Glaives and any other unit that does fire damage, typically like Hobgoblin Skirmishers. I forget what they're called, but those guys do fire damage as well. But anything that does fire damage is going to do a lot more. Just like another example is the Blasting Charges of the Blazing Beards. That'd be a nice combo. But that's going to really, really help him deal with fast units like Heavy Cav, the Feral Cold ones, Colossal Hunters, etc. I also forgot to mention the Horned ones, which are really, really good heavy Cav for the Lizardmen. In fact, they're best Cav, and which has fantastic AP values, I believe at around 40. Yeah, 41. Really good. Should help deal with some of their ranged units. As long as the great weapons renderers don't get on top of them. Rest of the army. Fire Glaives, as I mentioned. Blazing Beards of Berserk. So the overall tactics for the Chaos Dwarf side here is that they're going to try to protect their goodies. They have some Chaos Dwarves, which should help hold back any Skinks and Saurus and Goblin Laborers as well to keep everything off their squishier targets, their squishier units like the Fire Glaives, which aren't necessarily squishy, but rather, should I say, keep them off your units that you need firing, units that are important to your army. And the units that are important to the Chaos Dwarf army right now are these Fire Glaives, these Renderers, and these Granite Guard, the Blunderbuss ROR. These are your heavy hitting units, and the Chaos Dwarf player is going to attempt to hold back the Lizardmen Tide and make sure to keep these units firing and keep the great weapons back to fight off any heavy cav like the Horned Ones, fight off the Feral Cold Ones, etc., and even the Closet Hunters. But yeah, let's get right into it, see how this pans out. So, right in, we're going to see the Fireglaive starting to shoot at the Feral Basilodon. Good target. Get those off the field relatively quickly, and that'll help a lot. So look at that. Ash Storm. Let's slow that down real quick. Ash Storm blended in with the Blazing Beards blasting charges, did fantastic damage, practically deleted that skink unit in one volley. Obviously, you'd prefer to use those blasting charges or that whole combo together on a better unit, one that costs a little more, but getting skink skirmishers getting skinks off the field helps either way. And they're gonna get another blasting charge into that skink cohort, doing fantastic damage. The Chaos Dwarf player reserves that second blasting charge by toggling on fire at will and using it to throw into that other skink cohort. Fantastic plays by that Chaos Dwarf player. And as you can see, it's comboing really well with the Ash Storm, the Fireglaives. They're doing so much damage to that Basilodon because of that fire weakness. Even this one, which doesn't have that fire weakness on it right now, but you can see it is helping dramatically. Sure, they're getting helped by the Granite Guard, but still, that fire weakness helps so incredibly much, especially with having to deal with that 140 armor. Now we're going to have the infantry line up, start engaging with the other infantry, but both Basilodons have been shut down. This one, in fact, is dead. The other one is routing. We're going to have a banishment thrown on top of the Fireglaives, which is going to do tremendous damage if the Chaos Dwarf player doesn't notice. And it does. Oh my god, that does fantastic damage. Really well lined up. Is doing really solid, breaking up their formation, making sure they don't shoot as much because of that. Fireglaives are getting a Fate of Buna thrown on top of them. Really effective use of the Fate of Buna. Look how much damage that does. My god, that is ridiculous. Those Fireglaives are off the field already. Not even just from the Closet Hunters did fantastic on that charge, but the Fate of Buna was already basically had that nail in the coffin waiting, and the Closet Hunters just nailed it in. Hit it with that final hit from the hammer. The Goblin Laborers and the infantry on the right side are starting to, or rather, there's now a hole in the Chaos Dwarf side. So now the Feral Cold Ones and the skirmishers are going to be able to get on the other Fireglaives, shutting that other one down. Show to the old ones thrown on top to try to preserve the Colossal Hunters as they get shot by the Granite Guard. Feral Cold Ones have gotten into the cookie jar as well, getting rid of those Chaos Laborers and breaking off, shattering the Infernal Fireglaive. Skink skirmishers just shooting away at whatever they can get on, like the Renderers, who have routed. Other Renderers got on top of the Feral Cold Ones, but unfortunately were needed back here and are now being used properly against the Horned Ones and on top of the Colossal Hunters. Though they are going to need some help here. The other unit the other unit there with them is the Granite Guard, I believe, and they are not going to be able to provide much help here. Though the Cascading Fire Cloak is thrown on top of them, helps them keep in the fight, keep giving them melee defense up to 61. Though we also do have a Spirit Leech thrown on top of them, unless it's, Spirit Leech thrown on top of the Renderers, whittling them down a little bit more. And eventually, after the Fire Cloak goes away, the Horned Ones and the Feral Cold Ones, and just the amount of units here will be a little bit too much for the Renderers, though they will do a good chunk of damage into these Horned Ones. But yeah, the Chaos Dwarf player has, unfortunately, there will be another Ash Storm thrown down here to help with Asheroth Iron Hand as he whittles down some of this infantry. But the Chaos Dwarf player has unfortunately succumbed to the Lizardman Swarm. Some of the Renderers are still healthy at half HP, but the other one is down to 7 models, 1300 HP. They're not going to be much of use anymore, and a lot of the powerful units, other powerful units, that they're like the ranged units that the Chaos Dwarf player needed to protect, have unfortunately routed or broken or shattered. They are gone off the field, and the Chaos Dwarf player unfortunately doesn't have much left here, and you will probably see a bow out here soon enough. But it is okay to try to scrap back a little bit. I mean, your infantry is a little better than the Lizardman side here, or a lot better, but with the banishment like that thrown on top of your Infernal Guard, it's gonna hurt. It's really, really gonna hurt. And your infantry, as good as it is, can't deal with it's just amount of Lizardmen still left. Though they are the renderers are scrapping back really well here. I mean, they are trying their best. Up to 105 kills. What is their value looking at? 2,000 value. Just beating down on those horned ones, beating down on the feral cold ones, and even fighting off the Colossadon hunters. They are doing their best here. I mean, Great Weapon Renderers are really, really good. It's just when there's just so much of the Lizardmen tide here who have swarmed them and whittled, have just enveloped them to the point where the Renderers aren't able to fight engagements with support as well. It's just really hard there for the Chaos Dwarf players to really get good engagements. There's just so much tying your stuff down that it's hard to get these proper engagements that would get your units that value that you so desperately need. Astrogoth is just going to chase after the Slan. He could whittle down the Slan very quickly, but yeah, the Horned Ones are going to stop him. Something is going to go off here on the Infernal Guard, maybe out of Fate of Buna, and that's just going to finish them off. Horned Ones will do a little bit of AP damage into the Iron Hand, but yeah, the Lizardman player is going to win out there. The Chaos Dwarf player is going to bow out, rather. And that was a really, really good attempt at a scrap back with those renderers, but unfortunately, there was just too much for the Chaos Dawi player to handle, and it just is really, really unfortunate. Once his range units got shut down, and considering that he only had one renderer left there, it's tough. It's tough, especially when your Fire Glaives, or rather your Infernal Guard, are getting banishment. So, good scrap back though, nonetheless. It was a really good fight. Lazarus is a solid player, and so is Tequila Sunset. They have their own YouTube channel. I'll throw it out in the comment section, so go check it out. They cast their own replays and other replays as well, I believe. So, support them. Let's go over a breakdown for the values here. 2,600 value for the Slan. And no surprise there, really good cast there on the Fate of Bunas. I mean, rather really good choice targets for that Fate of Buna. And these are reasons why the Fate of Buna and Spirit Leech are so well embedded in the meta, is what I'm trying to say, I guess, for the lack of better words. That's why it's just so stuck in there. A lot of the other death spells just aren't as great in vanilla. So that's the reason why you would typically go for these spells. You saw the effectiveness of them. For the Horned Ones, 1,200 value, very nice. Did really well there. You scrapped really hard with the Renderers, even though that wasn't a great matchup for them. They still did really good, and they even got into a lot of good targets, Chaos Dwarf Warriors, etc. The Reprodactyls, they don't look like they got a lot of value, 785, but that's still good. That's still really good. I know by a lot of value, you normally expect like a Colossadon Hunter to see 2,000, over 1,000 value, but this one only got 785. But I say only, not in the way that sounds. By 785, only 785. I mean, it could have gotten a lot more if it was in a different situation or against a different build. It did extremely well there. If you saw what I was seeing there, if you watched there at that moment, they did extremely well comboed up with that Fate of Buna. They finished off those Infernal Fireglaives and even scrapped a little bit with the Renderers. So they did good. They did fantastic. I love that unit. Will always bring them in most matchups. So Tequila Sunset did good with them there. Obviously the Farabastiladons had a tough time. Kind of got destroyed early on. Really good snipe there by Lazarus. Feral Codwins did okay. The rest of the value, negligible. Not much to point out there. Astrogolf only got 500 value. Really tough. I'm not sure I 100% I agree on Astrogolf, but he's a fun lord. Rather, I'm not 100% I agree with using him against Lizardmen, but at the same time, he's fun. Why not? He's a good melee fighter. Can fight down Slann. It's just he like any other foot lord, he can get tied down really easily, and I just think some other choices are better. Like specifically like the Sorcerer Prophets, just cheaper overall and do the same job, pretty much. 375 on this renderer. Unfortunate. You saw what happened to them. They got absolutely destroyed. Actually, I can't remember what happened to them. Now that I'm thinking about it, but they just clearly had a tough time. 375 value, 23 kills. They probably got Fate Bunid maybe, or I think they got hit by maybe the Colossal Hunters. I'm not sure. Somebody would have to point it out to me in the comments, or I'd have to rewatch. Anyways, 2,000 value on these guys. Fantastic. Did a really, really good job. You saw what they did. They're good in this matchup. Solid in this matchup. One of the best anti-large heavy hitter units that they have, that the Chaos Dwarf units have, or faction has. Fireglaves did good. Blunderbuss good. Just if only they could have operated longer. And everything else, yeah, negligible. But a really, really solid match there. Tell me what you guys think about this form of replay. I'm going to this form of recording. I might do both the cinematic and tactical breakdowns like this. 2 separate type of videos, 2 separate type of playlists. Just let me know what you think. And I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks to Tequila Sunset for posting this replay. Bye-bye.